our guest today. Hello, Bobby Booker.
Hello, Trudy Haynes. My goodness, what an honor.
Bobby Booker is a catchy name. Is it together? I mean, did you come up with it? Did someone else come up with it? And did anyone ever call you BB?
Yeah, actually, one of the errors with my just published brand new website was that it was mislabeled Booby, but it is definitely Bobby, Bobbi. And I was actually dubbed that by one of the members of the Roots, their longtime bass player, Leonard Nelson Hubbard, who just passed away a little earlier this year in 2022. And he and I were longtime good friends. And one of his nicknames for Robin, which is the name I went through high school and college and everything else with, his nickname for Robin was Bobby, which
Oh,
is the
okay.
name I started writing under so I wouldn't have any conflict with my job. I figured as a writer, especially working for a lot of underground and alternative music sites,
No.
you
It's,
know, it
yeah.
so it caught on,
It
and
sure did.
yeah, and that's the name now.
You know what? I don't like sometimes talking to people on radio because may not be able to see you as well as I can. I was
Hmm.
digging around and I found a couple of little pictures of you kind of in action. I don't know if they can see it or not, but there's
Hmm.
one of you in action. And I'm noticing about these that you have a lot of paraphernalia. When I did radio, which was years ago,
Hmm.
we only had one thing, the mic. So
Yeah,
you got a real studio that you work in.
I've actually got several studios that I work in.
Oh,
Um, because I'm locally based with WRTI 90.1, and I'm currently in one of the production studios, a former news booth, and basically every studio here we've got about maybe 8 to 12 studios,
wow.
maybe about six of those are working. We do live performances as well as on air assets and pre production capabilities. So,
All of
and
that goes into radio production?
all of it, everything,
All
and
this,
as well as writing.
wow. So you're a lady
And
of doing
and video production too. So it's a
all
multimedia presentation now. Radio is um, is on multiple platforms, so it's not just what you hear; it's what's happening online with our website, what's happening with our social media, and as which includes video content, the stories that we produce, and just the little things like tweets and other updates that we provide.
well, you are very involved. When I was doing radio, which was years ago, we
Hmm.
only had a mic and maybe something for the ears, maybe.
Hmm.
But that was it. Now you're just doing as much as I do and more. But
Well,
you should be
that's
because you've
well,
been
that's
doing
the
it.
that's the thing with contemporary media right now, which is one of the things I try and underscore with my colleagues and the students that I also teach. That you need to be well versed in multiple media platforms. You don't necessarily have to be an expert in everything, but you need to at least have a toe in the water of all things that exist.
Well, now the program that I usually hear about is your WRTI
Hmm.
evening program. So
Hmm.
you also have multiple working hours,
Hmm.
and you work for other people because you're
Occasionally.
your own person, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean,
Well,
my big thing is that I am an on-air personality at WRTI, and I've been affiliated with the station for 40 years. I started my career as a student at WRTI when they were a college radio station, and have returned as a media professional now that they are a public radio station. So we're tied into National Public Radio, and we're a part of that presentation. And in addition to my on air work, I'm behind the scenes as a producer and writer. And additionally, I am a professor of media writing and an instructor of that for a couple of educational um, facilities.
Yeah, let's
So
talk about some of those, Bobby, because you do more than I do. I'll tell you right now, you do
I
more.
do a lot.
And you're also the head of the Pen and Pencil Club, which is that's an organization that's global, isn't it?
Well, actually, we are tied into um, um, a number of journalists and media clubs around the world. We
Mm-hmm.
have reciprocal relationships. And indeed, I do serve as the president of the Pen and Pencil Club. I'm now in my third year of leadership in that role. And for several years, was the vice president of that organization. And we have congenial and reciprocal relationships with a number of journalism clubs around the world, including the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. So it is definitely a wonderful um,
Well,
position that I have, but more importantly, I just get to hang out with a number of my media colleagues on a regular basis, and that's just fun.
well, I want to say, I want to honor you first of all because you're doing a hell of a job to be
Uh,
on that and a rare job. You know, it was a time when we had a lot of women doing all kinds of reports on radio, but to
mhm.
be doing what you're doing at night and in the subject that you've picked as your home deal of jazz, that's a little unusual for a woman to be doing on radio these days or in your position.
It somewhat is. I mean, I'm actually a news person, and I always have said that I'm a writer who happens to be a journalist.
Hmm.
So news has always been where I'm at, and even in my position as a jazz music presenter, I utilize my access to the mic to share news tidbits about these legends whose work um, has is relatively timeless when you think about the contributors to the jazz genre who are still hailed around the world. And
Yeah,
Philadelphia is so fortunate because this is a place where a number of those jazz legends cut their teeth and still cut their teeth.
right.
So it's a great thing.
What took you towards jazz? Because you're also famous for classical.
Well, the station is, and I was also trained in journalism as a arts and culture reporter. The
Hmm.
National Endowment for the Arts granted me a fellowship to study at Columbia University opera and classical music coverage. So, but I will say that my acumen in that regard is not as well versed as what's happening with jazz. Um,
What took you
uh,
towards jazz? What kind of leaned
it
that way?
my whole thing is really a love of the music,
Uh huh.
and jazz is one of the genres that I enjoy being engaged in.
I see.
I'm very proud of a program that I do produce and have hosted for now well over 20 years called Spirit Soul Music on Ovations here on WRTI. And that's where I delve into the spiritual message that
Mhm.
is contained in a number of musical genres that includes jazz, soul, R&B, some classical, some rock, some country.
Wow.
So
Oh,
I'm kind
yeah.
of more of a music person than anything else.
Uh huh. So where is
Hmm.
this taking you?
Hmm?
Where do you see this taking you in the future? Are you? staying right there? Are you put? Are you home? Or
Oh
do
no.
you have
I mean, it's kind of interesting. WRTI has always just been a part of what I've done in my adult professional life. Again, I started here as a radio news reporter, and I did that solidly for the better part of 15 years
mm,
before I launched off and became a print journalist. And but I've always enjoyed the being a music presenter. It is something that I kind of happened into, but I also in just knowing that one needs to be well versed in all mediums, I made sure that I was not just simply solely known as a news reporter.
mm,
So I trained pretty intensely by just sitting in and studying with the masters how to be a radio music host, especially in this form. Now, as far as the future, I consider myself a dandelion, and I'm just like the little weeds that come up every spring, and when you blow them, they float off and into the wind.
and which
That's
way
that's kind
are
of
they
me.
blowing now? Which way are they blowing now?
Oh, I don't know. The wind does what it does, and I just float along
All right.
and
You're
see
the
where I land.
well, you're landing and floating in the right with the right company and in the right places because you're a queen on this media. And
Why,
we're
thank you.
happy to have you. You're an unusual addition to our radio
Mm.
listening, and especially jazz. Does that encompass some kind of influence from your family?
Well, I was raised by my father and grandmother in South Philadelphia, and I guess in a somewhat unusual circumstance because I didn't meet my mother until I was a teenager. So my father was the primary person who helped mold and steer my interest, and his whole thing, because he was a let's just say a free spirit of sorts,
I can.
eh, who 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 moved here as part of the Great Migration, so that he could live life his way
Mhm.
as a black man in America. So when the opportunity came along to raise this little girl child, he he basically um, really followed a lot of his whims and ideas about about child rearing, and
Uh,
he allowed me to explore my interests. And when he saw that I was inclined to write at age 8, he immediately enrolled me in a typing class with the advice that if you know how to type, you'll always have a job.
good,
And
good saying. I
he knew
like.
what he was talking about.
I like him too.
Oh
Listen,
boy,
have you put all this in the book?
you know, I should. So now I must. Now that
You
we've
should.
talked about it.
It's such an interesting path to follow. How you developed into this and went into all of these different avenues and have culminated them so that you're one person, and without any little piece of it, you're challenged.
Yeah. And I, every day that I get a chance, I share with anyone who will listen that I am the result of a black man's dream and a village that helped to raise a motherless child during a very difficult time in this city's history.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still standing because there was this one black man who believed in what he saw in me and encouraged me in spite and despite. the challenges that were around me and the naysayers that I know he encountered. I I took it upon myself to believe in him believing in me. And that has sustained me for I would say my entire life. It gave me a backbone of confidence and assurance to be who it is that I am.
That's very
And
comforting to hear, because you
yeah,
usually hear mothers giving that kind of strength to their children. And here you have
that's
a
true.
father. You
Well, and when it comes down to it, um, my father, just like everyone else, everyone's had bad relationships, but he refused to allow me to disparage my mother.
know,
He was very forthright in that um, a decision could have been made otherwise, and that I didn't necessarily have to be here. But that said, we
you
were
are
to
here. That's it.
I am here, but his whole thing was that the right thing to do at all times is to honor your mother and your father. And in spite of me not knowing the specifics of her whereabouts and not having her in my life, he um, uh, chose to allow writing to serve as my therapy and outlet. And again, I was to respect her at all times.
Right.
And so there was no bad mouthing. And more importantly, there were no pity parties.
Hmm.
That she was not a part of my life was not something that I bemoaned. It was just a statement of the fact of my circumstance. And there were other things to do. And so we
Here you
did.
are,
Exactly.
DB of the radio.
Indeed.
Wonderful. And we're so glad to have you with us. And I know you're going to write that book.
I now must. if you It'd be great, are if you write a forward for me as well.
Well, if you ask, you're
Okay.
getting the way so far. So, come on.
Okay, there you go. We're going to work this out.
Okay. But it's been a
And
pleasure because I originally, when I thought about writing about jazz, because I know very little and I'm sure I could learn a lot from you. In fact, all of us listening now can. And I hope that comes to fruition, that you
mm,
will someday even be teaching us, writing about you, teaching us, and playing like mad, teaching us. Okay,
well,
we've got a lot to learn.
oh, no question. And
TV
you can
is the one
tune
to
in.
do it.
One of the beautiful things is that Philadelphia has such a wonderful music legacy, and with WRTI, which has now been on the air for well over 70 years, you can always tune in the WRTI 90.1 and hear great music. We've got a number of great hosts, and I'm so lucky to host Jazz Through the Night every weeknight from midnight until 6 a.m. So, I talk to people and I speak to their pets
Well, that's,
and keep the household nice and comfy.
well, that neighborhood that you came from started a good thing, and they must be very proud of Bobby Booker. Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you again, ma'am.